Okay, it is 3:30. Samantha, is it okay to go ahead and start? I'm looking at zoning committee members that are here.
Yeah, I see about 5 currently.
Okay. Okay. So I will go ahead and get started. The March 11th, 2021 meeting of the Zoning Committee of the St. Paul Planning Commission will now come to order. The chair of the Planning Commission has previously determined that it is not practical or prudent for the Planning Commission and its committees to meet in person pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.02. Considering the COVID-19 health pandemic, it is not feasible for any member of the Zoning Committee to be present at our regular location. Committee members attending this meeting are doing so by telephone or other electronic means. It is also not feasible for members of the public to attend the meeting at its regular location due to the health pandemic and emergency. Arrangements have been made so that applicants and members of the public may also attend this meeting by telephone or other electronic means. Accordingly, no meeting is being held in City Hall Council chambers at 15 West Kellogg Boulevard at this time. Again, this public hearing is being conducted remotely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting is also being recorded. Even though this hearing is being conducted remotely, the committee's public hearing rules and procedures still apply as if the committee were meeting in its usual place. These rules and procedures are as follows. The zoning committee's recommendations and findings must have a rational basis based upon the St. Paul Zoning Code and applicable state and federal laws. The zoning committee's actions today are recommendations. They are not final decisions. The committee's recommendations are forwarded to the Planning Commission for final action. The committee's recommendations will be considered by the full Planning Commission at its regular meeting held 1 week from Friday. The Planning Commission's meeting is open to the public, but it is not a public hearing. The decisions on the Planning Commission on conditional use permits, non-conforming use permits, site plans, variances, and other zoning permits are final decisions unless appealed to the City Council. The decisions of the Planning Commission on rezoning applications are only recommendations. By state law, the City Council, following a public hearing before it, makes the final decision on the rezoning applications. The following rules and procedures govern today's public hearing of the Zoning Committee. First, the chair will call the secretary to take attendance by the committee. Committee members will need to respond verbally for the record. For committee members during the meeting, please mute your microphones except when recognized by the chair to speak. Discussion is indeed intended for committee members and staff only, except during public hearing items when the chair invites individuals to speak. Staff will be monitoring microphones and muting committee members and members of the public as needed. When using Teams, the Teams chat function only, please do so only to indicate that you have a question or comment. The chat function is part of the official meeting recording. Type Q or question into the chat feature when you have a question, and C or comment if you have a comment. The chair and staff will monitor the chat function so that the chair may recognize committee members and staff in an orderly way. After being recognized by the chair, committee members shall state their name before speaking. This helps others in the meeting and assists with the official recording. When the chair calls the committee to vote on agenda items, the secretary will be called to do a roll call. Committee members must respond verbally for the record and vote either yes or no. Cases will be called in the order they appear on the agenda, and the chair reserves the right to limit the length of testimony if deemed necessary. I'll ask the recording secretary to now conduct a roll call of the committee members that are present for the meeting. Each committee member should acknowledge their presence by saying here.
Commissioner Baker?
Here.
Commissioner DeJoy?
No, it's got a little.
Commissioner Grill?
Here.
It's mostly green.
Commissioner Hood?
Look at
Here.
mostly green.
Commissioner Ringo Morales? Commissioner Riley?
Here.
Commissioner Said?
Here.
Commissioner Tagioff. I
Okay.
have 5 present.
Thank you. If you are a member of the public that would like to speak during the specific items public hearing, you will be asked to identify yourself at the appropriate time. The public shall not utilize the chat for communicating public testimony, as it is not considered part of the public record. After I read the item number and title, staff will give an oral report of the item, and then I will open up the floor for committee members to ask questions of staff. After that, I will open up the public hearing on the item. All testimony and questions will be addressed to the chair. You may speak in favor or in opposition, and you will be limited to no more than 2 minutes. People who exceed the time limit may have their microphones muted by staff. I will first ask for testimony from those in favor and then from those in opposition. You must provide your name and address for the public record. Please mute yourself during this meeting, except during your 2 minutes when you're specifically called upon to speak. You are allowed to speak only once, with the exception of the applicant, who will be allowed an opportunity to respond to the testimony and answer committee questions. And I do see Commissioner, I think Tagioff is here.
Tagioff, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I will now move for entertain a motion for approval of the February 25th meeting minutes. I see Commissioner Grill.
This is Commissioner Grill. I move the February 25th meeting minutes.
Thanks, Commissioner. We have a motion by Commissioner Grill. Do we have a second?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Sayed. I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second by Commissioner Saeed. Any discussion at this time? If not, we will vote.
Commissioner Hood.
Yes.
Commissioner Saeed.
Yes.
Commissioner Riley.
Yes.
Commissioner Tagioff.
Yes.
Commissioner Grill.
Yes.
And Chair Baker.
Yes.
6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, thank you for that. Before we get into old business, I do have a few items for the upcoming site plan review committee meeting. A few items. Cretin-Durham Hall, Ryan STEM Center addition at 550 Albert Street South, which is an institutional addition. Farewell Yards at 150 Waters Street West, new mixed use. And Charles M. Schultz Ice Arena at 800 Snelling Avenue South. And this is a parking lot reconstruction and reservoir demolition. All right, with that, we will move into old business, which is James Lexington Apartment. This is a conditional use permit for a 65 feet, 8 inches building height, and also variances for front yard and rear yard setbacks and side yard setbacks. We had this item come before us earlier on, and we provided staff with direction. This item now is coming back before us, and I will turn it over to Mr. Richardson to give a report out.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Hello, Commissioners. My name is Mike Richardson. I am planning staff assigned to this item, and I'm trying to share my screen at the same time I'm talking. All right, can you see my screen?
We can.
Great, thank you. So as the chair mentioned, I'm coming back to you with an update on this item. Usually updates are short. I'm afraid this one may not be, but hopefully the length of it will prove useful, and we can get to the bottom of some of the issues that we talked about a month ago. So staff worked with the applicant who is on the call today, along with the architect, and looked at a couple of different things that were outlined in the memo to you. The first thing is the building is shifted east to the eastern property line, making Lexington the front of the building. You can see that the entry has been reoriented to face Lexington Parkway. We also tried to get closer to accurate measurements for both height and, because of height, what correct setbacks would be, since they're related. So the actual height of the building isn't changing, but the measurement is more precise. And so that changes from 69.6 to 65'8". And as I mentioned, because that height changes and because there's a direct relationship with the setback distances, those also change. So that's why there's such a long purpose statement, and why the staff report is somewhat long. So as you can see on this diagram that's also provided in your packet, the applicant has shown in orange here what the outline of the proposed building is, and then yellow shows what the required setback is based on code and the new height measurement. I wanted to note too the findings, the structure of the staff report has been modified as well, in part to reflect sort of the change to Lexington being the front, but also to better address the difference in height between the two portions of the building, the 5-story portion on the west and the 4-story portion on the east. So this diagram is showing sort of in the lighter gray where the findings from the earlier February report applied, and in the darker black where those findings apply in the staff report that's being considered today. I also put this together. This is a summary showing the change from February 11th staff report to the staff report today. And again, because the finding numbers changed, I organized it based on sort of what's being requested in the application. So on the left, you'll see that the cup for height, the setback variance for James on the north, and then the Lexington and Alley setback variances. Based on the changes and the evaluation since those changes, you can see how that's changed. The cup for height, the recommendation from staff remains the same because the height didn't change even though the measurement differed and the building was shifted east. You know, both of those things remain the same, and so the staff recommendation stays the same. And then the only remaining finding that wasn't met was based on anything unique to the property, and I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But staff found that there was really no relationship between slope as described in the application and where that building face needs to be on Lexington. So again, just to remind folks of what those findings are. So the 2A and 2C staff found that there were policies in the comp plan, which includes a policy in the Matt Groveland plan that talk about scale transition, you know, from one site to another and to its neighbors. And staff's opinion was that was not met. And then, as I mentioned, 3D was about, you know, situation being unique to the property, and that staff didn't find that there was a relationship between slope and the location of that the western wall on the Lexington Parkway facade. All right, so I want to mention too, in an earlier slide, I said something about how articulated building approximates required setback or slope site, which is confusing in a mouthful. But I want to talk about this a little bit because it is relevant to the discussion and relevant to one of the findings that was met in staff's opinion. So on the top diagram, you'll see an extremely simple building. And similar to the case here at James and Lexington, the grade falls quite significantly across the face. And on the bottom image, you can see, this is a plan view from the top, how that translates into a change in setback using the formula that we have in the code. So as you get higher and higher in terms of distance from the grade to the top of the building, you know, the setback is required to be further and further back. Usually that's not a huge issue because the sites are not usually this on this much of a slope, but it is here. So this is applying that concept to the project here. And it's a little bit hard to see. There's a lot going on here, and I apologize for that. But the blue line here is showing what the blue line showed on the other one. So in this corner, I think you can see my hand moving around here. On the north side, at the tall portion of the building, the height of the building would dictate that it would be set this far back. And at the northwest corner of the building, based on how tall it is compared to the grade, it would be this tall. So that's showing that same idea. And you can see here that the footprint of the building actually, rather than follow that line, it steps back a little bit. There are balconies in this white area, but the building does step back here. And it's similar in the south, on the south side too, where you have a similar situation with the grade falling off. And even though they do require a variance here on the south side, it does step back quite a bit. So that's part of the logic that went into that recommendation for the variances. The other unique, interesting thing that I wanted to talk about was the alley on the east side of the parcel, indicated by the overly large blue obvious arrow. It's unique in St. Paul. There may be a few other places where this situation happens, but I did not find any. It is a case where we have an alley that is 30 feet wide. Most of our alley right away is 20 feet wide. And that has to do, I was trying to look a bit at the history. It had to do with the acquisition that happened when 35 was built. And importantly, it's part of this sort of series of rights of way that border the site to the east. So you have this 30-foot wide alley, 2/3 of which is built, and the rest of it is sort of turf and trees. And then you have the James Avenue leg, which is unique, and then an off-ramp in the right of way. So I'm pointing out that it's a unique condition at the site. This is the survey that was provided by the applicant showing that, and it's a little bit hard to see, but this is a 30-foot wide right of way here. So this area, it's close to the western half of this right of way, is turf and trees, and the paved operating alley section is the eastern part. So looking at how the building works there, the current proposal is that the building is built all the way to the east property line in that alley right of way, and that leaves what's an 18-foot setback on the Lexington side. Now, one of the things that staff's talked to the applicant about is the idea of pursuing an alley vacation to the east and shifting the building somewhat. So if that was to happen, then you could get to a point where the Lexington Parkway setback is met, and you'd either have the same setback in the east or even greater, depending on how much of a vacation they received. In conversations with the Parks Department too, they're in favor of additional space on the parkway as well in the setback area. Oh, I should note the note in bold at the bottom. So if the committee ends up recommending approval for this, depending on their discussion, staff would recommend that a condition should be added that requires the applicant to apply for a vacation and shift the building at least 7 feet. Now, it wouldn't be, the construction of the building would not be contingent upon that happening, because that has to go through its own process and public works, and it's probably a MnDOT right of way. So if somebody said no, that couldn't happen, we don't want to prevent the project from happening, but we want them to pursue it and take that action if it's allowed by whoever controls it. Just an update on written testimony. A lot of this is similar to what you saw before. The District 14 Housing and Land Use Committee did support this project in a very similar form. The building was the same. There were some slight differences in the variances that were requested, but they were supportive of the project. There are no new letters of support, so I won't go over that. There was one additional letter in opposition from residents about the variance on the north, especially I think all around though, and the idea that it would increase sort of a looming presence of the building. So based on the updated findings that have been provided to you, staff recommends denial of the cut for height due to 2A and 2C, and denial of the variance for the front setback due to 3D, I believe it was, but approval of the rest of the variances. And I will leave it at that for now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Richardson. I will open up to my colleagues. Any questions or comments for Mr. Richardson? Commissioner Taggio.
Yes, one question regarding the interaction of the height and the side yard variances. So as I understand the RM2 code, the reason the additional setbacks are required at the sides particularly is because of the height. So the applicant wants to go up to 68 feet or so, and therefore they need larger than average side yard setbacks. If the height variance is denied and the applicant is forced to stay at 50 feet or below, that means that they would be able to build to 9 feet side yard by right. So the application to take the setbacks down to 10 feet would essentially be moot. Is that a reasonable understanding?
Yes, that is accurate.
What does one do in the position when essentially the variance application becomes moot, if that were to occur?
Through the chair, Commissioner Taggio, I would say the proposal is sort of taken as a package, and if the height was denied and they were forced to build lower, or they couldn't build as high, I guess is a better way to say that. I think like you say, the process would be moot. I mean, the application for the variances would be moot, and they would be able to pursue the project, proceed, just building it by right and submit for site plan review. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from Mr. Richardson? All right, thanks, Mr. Richardson. I would like to call up the applicant at this time, if they would like to add or add anything to the report. Or Mr. Funk, could you state your name and address for the record?
Absolutely. My name is Chet Funk. I'm the lead developer on this, and no address, right? I'm the applicant on this one.
We still do need an address for.
Oh, okay. Yep, current address 1103 Lincoln Avenue, St. Paul.
And do you have anybody else speaking with you at this time?
Anybody else speaking with me? I believe Ellie, the architect, is on this call as well. So needed he could
Okay.
check.
Could he also provide his name and address for the record, and I will turn it over to you.
My name is Eli Zamira, project manager from DJR Architecture. I live in 1575 Ford Parkway in St. Paul.
Thank you. And is there anything, Mr. Funk, that you'd like to add?
Great. No, not necessarily, major additions to what we've already been proposing. I had written a written testimony and submitted that after the last staff report as well. I think that we've done had a lot of very good conversations with Mike and re-looking at this project and the way that we could shift it down. I think I'd just be open for any commentary or questions. While I do understand maybe some of the nature of could we just make the current structure more voluminous, I think that the project as being proposed works architecturally, and I don't know the answer off the top of my head whether or not we could remove a fifth floor, and it is just a partial fifth floor, and still obtain the FAR ratio that we'd be looking for the affordability component on this. So yeah, I appreciate all the engagement with the staff. I was very pleased to see the report come out where virtually all of the conditions were met in the recent staff finding. Again, from my perspective, the major concern here or the pushback would be the scale of the project. And that is something that, in my perspective, I've worked closely with the neighborhood and kind of the local stakeholders of that to determine what scale of project would be appropriate for this, and found a lot of support and approval from the local council. So that would be the only thing that I would add as a reminder on that. That is something I've spent a lot of time at length speaking with the local district and the stakeholders of the project.
Thanks for that. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments for the applicant? Commissioner Grill?
If additional conditions were proposed, so if it was approved today and additional conditions were proposed, would you be opposed to adding language that would specify that units are required to be, that are affordable, are required to be occupied by low-income residents or something along those lines? Just putting in writing the goals towards including those low-income units.
Absolutely. I believe, and thank you for the question, I believe it already is in the current RM2 zoning that it's specifically identified as 60% AMI. So there is some definition around it, but if you have a further proposal of that, I'd certainly entertain that.
Okay. And Chair, can I ask one more?
Oh, yeah.
And the proposal that Mr. Richardson put forward around pursuing the vacation of the alley, is that something that you are interested or planning to do if the item were to pass today?
I am, yeah, and I've spoken at length with them as well. Given the initial conversations of doing these projects together, vacating the alley is, I would just say, all but imminent on this block. So it likely will be completely vacated at some point. Being that these are being developed in two different timelines right now, I'm not the only stakeholder in vacating that alley right there, so I don't fully control that decision.
Thank you.
Mr. Richardson, care to chime in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that too, and the way the condition would be worded would be so that it would be only a request to vacate that north-south section of the alley immediately to the east. So the condition would set up sort of a minimum request. If more was requested than that, that's fine. But it just sets up, just that north-south segment, and at a minimum 7 feet. It might work better to have more than that, but just to set the minimum expectation. And my understanding is that the applicant could do that on just that segment because they're the only property owner adjacent to it, as opposed to if they were to try to vacate the entirety of that L-shaped alley, they would need, agreement with everybody who is adjacent to that alley. So just wanted to clarify that.
Mr. Richardson, since you're here, I guess one of my questions is, and I think that depending on public hearing and the discussion from my colleagues and a vote, that could potentially happen. My question is, was that discussed potentially with the applicant before around that adjustment? So the
Chair Baker, yes.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think, you know, in the conversations that staff had with the applicant, we talked about how close can we get to meeting the setback requirement on the Lexington frontage, since that is a parkway and that is the front, while at the same time maintaining, you know, the same or similar building design that kept the FAR that the applicant said they needed in order to maintain the affordable housing component.
Okay. Thank you. To my colleagues, any other questions for the applicant? Comments? Thank you. Appreciate it. We may pull you back in if we need to concerning the public hearing. And I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing at this time to talk about the changes. So I'll officially open up the public hearing for this application. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? And again, is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? All right, hearing none, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of the application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? And lastly, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? All right, hearing none, I officially close the public hearing on this application, and I will move forward to open discussion or entertain a motion from my colleagues. Commissioner Grill.
I'm on my iPad today, so if you see me poking, that's why. So I think first off, I appreciate that the applicant was willing to work with staff. I also really appreciate staff being able to work with members of the committee that had, I think, concerns around the staff recommendation. I do still have feelings, even though there were only a few staff conditions left that they were recommending denial for. I'm still in favor of denying the staff recommendation and approving the application for 2A, 2C, and 3D. And staff was good enough to help put together some language and some conditions if we were going to go that route. So I guess, first of all, for other members of the committee, I just want that you to be aware that if you've come to the committee since we saw this, which I think there are quite a few people, Commissioner Hood and myself both had some reservations around the staff recommendation. And so we were the ones that requested it be laid over and that staff work with the applicant. So just first off, appreciative everyone taking the time and working on this. But we do have an alternative set of language if that's the way the committee is interested in going. So I don't want to shut down conversation or discussion, but we do have some items that are options.
Thanks, Commissioner Grill. Any other comments from committee members? I wanted to, if I'll give some people time to, if they would like to say something, I wanted to highlight a few things. First, I also agree with Commissioner Grill. I appreciate Mr. Richardson and his staff really working with the applicant. I think that the amount of time I believe that kind of went back and forth after that initial report and trying to connect with making sure that there was an understanding of the site, making sure that committee members' voices were heard on some of their either concerns or comments for the applications and the findings, and trying to ensure that there's integrity to staff's overall report, and making sure all of that was kind of met. I appreciate it. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It took a little time, and I appreciate the applicant for working with us on that. So I definitely appreciate it. I also wanted to highlight that I appreciate staff's commitment to 2A, somewhat 2C. And the reason I bring this up is because we've been having a lot of conversations just internally on not only with the zoning committee, but also just overall planning commission around the comprehensive plan, and in making sure that we highlight the comp plan because it is an important document. We believe it's an important document. And I appreciate that Mr. Richardson highlighted, and I understand where he's coming from, where this application does not seem to be in substantial compliance with the comp plan. And Mr. Richardson specifically highlights and lists out where that is with policies. And I think that I want to bring this to, my colleagues' attention is because this is what we have been asking for. This is what we've been talking about around making sure that we are able to articulate and highlight when we believe that the comp plan is being followed and when we believe that it is not. And so in staff's recommendation and rationale, and Mr. Richardson puts forward that rationale on why that finding wasn't met. So I appreciate that. I think another concern that I have is that, and I will say it this way, that I am somewhat leery in kind of going over into the direction that what I'm about to talk about, but I will provide my perspective. There is right now, from what I have seen in meeting minutes and also hear from the applicant, that this project cannot move forward unless it meets some of these requirements concerning height and kind of where it's located on the site. And I have a concern with that because what is butting up against is staff's recommendation and potentially some committee members' recommendations, or at least thoughts and stance that could be in contradiction with either the comp plan, and then for 3B, and let me just make sure I get it correct. Not 3B, it is 3D. Yeah, 3D, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property not being created by the landowner. And I have some concern about that because I think that this project potentially could be done in a way where, in the applicant's kind of own words, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. The applicant is saying that they need this project to kind of look as is, and they believe that they've done enough engagement with the community for that to be the case. And so I just want to highlight that I actually am in support of staff's recommendation on this, specifically around making the changes, working with the applicant, and being true to the items that they see that Mr. Richardson saw in the comp plan, and also concerning slope. And I think it's 3D, and in findings of not being met. So I just want to highlight that. I agree a lot with what Commissioner Grill has stated, and I actually wouldn't want to see something on this site. But for those reasons, I just wanted to provide that perspective, and will give insight into my vote. I do think did I see, are there any other comments from commissioners at this time? Oh, yes. Commissioner Tagiao.
Thank you, Chair. So I would also echo the feelings expressed by Commissioner Grill and by the Chair, and start by saying I would also like to see a development on this site, and I certainly commend the developers intention to take advantage of the increased FAR bonus provided by the RM2 zoning code amendments to kind of add in that affordability component. But when I step back for a moment, the fundamental problem here is really that the developer wants to build a taller, wider, deeper building than the RM2 code allows on that lot, essentially for economic reasons. And one of the reasons I find that persuasive is because we conducted an RM zoning study last year. It studied these sorts of sites extensively, from little infills to large greenfield sites, and came up with heights and setbacks, and extensively studied the interaction between the size of a lot, the required setbacks, and the permissible FAR. And obviously this site is challenging. It has a slope that's unconventional, but it doesn't, in my mind, excuse the developer from responding to the lower scale of the neighborhood, particularly a lot the housing to the north, the R4 housing. And so I agree with the finding regarding height. And secondly, I wanted to sort of just talk briefly about the interaction between height and parking requirements and overall density. One of the findings in the report, I think 4C, said the applicant has demonstrated that compressing the footprint of the building is not possible due to minimum requirements for parking stall count dimensions. Obviously, were the developer to build fewer apartments, they would need to build fewer parking stalls, and could therefore maybe look at the footprint of the building again. So I want to highlight the commissioners that those things obviously interact and are dependent upon one another. I personally would like to see the developer come back with something that can more closely meet the requirements of the RM2 zoning code, because for my understanding, I see things like CUPs in RM2 being suited for sites where it really is sort of, you don't need to kind of, you're not just trying to exceed the site, you're trying to go taller for a specific reason on a site where it's appropriate to do so.
Thank you. I also see Commissioner Riley.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Taggioff. I think that to some extent, having a conversation about a building height that is pretty much directly related to having to provide a certain number of parking spaces that in almost any other transit supported neighborhood would not require that many parking spaces doesn't actually feel to be in keeping with the intent of the zoning code of it doesn't seem to be in keeping with the intent of the zoning code specifically for RM2. It feels a little, I'm struggling commenting on this because the last big conversation we had about housing, we requested, some robust conversation around accommodating all sorts of types of housing. But that conversation was in one of those more intensely developed or developable areas of the city, which is not this particular site. So I think I'm feeling myself leaning in the same direction as Commissioner Taggioff and Chair Baker, and I'm sort of in a quandary, I guess, about the relationship between consistency with the comprehensive plan and consistency with the zoning policies. I do think that Mr. Richardson provided a really great set of explanatory materials, and I really, really appreciate the time and effort he took to do that, as well as work with the applicant and the applicant with the community. However, I'm still not feeling as I don't believe that we're really meeting the intent of the zoning code either. So that's kind of where I am. Thank you. I don't know if there was a question in there. Maybe there's I guess my question for Mr. Richardson is perhaps, were they to produce fewer units, how many parking spaces would they need? So, if it was a 4-story building instead of a 5-story building, would they still need the side yard, the setback variances, even if they didn't need the conditional use permit? So I think that's sort of my question related to that. So thank you for your time.
Mr. Richardson, before you answer, I just wanted to highlight to Mr. Funk, because the public hearing is closed now, I'm not intentionally refusing to call on you. It's just that we can't at this time. Mr. Richardson?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Riley and Commissioners, I think I'm going to try to respond in a way that's helpful. I agree with commissioners who have spoken about a connection between the number of units and parking stalls, and that having be, if you choose to have more units, then obviously you're going to have more stalls that we have a minimum for in the city, which is going to, drive the size of the footprint. And so, yes, by reducing the number of stalls, you could potentially reduce the footprint. I guess there are two things I would say. One, staff already asked the applicant to reduce the number of units. They had originally proposed a number of stalls that exceeded by a couple, I think. So they already reduced that. I think the other maybe more substantive thought is that there is also, and I'm guessing this may be what Mr. Funk was going to say too. While there's a relationship between parking stalls and number of units, there's also a relationship between adding affordable housing and sort of the financial implications there, and having a minimum FAR to make that happen. And so I don't know if it's a triangle that's happening there, but there are multiple things sort of pushing and pulling in all of these discussions. So I just wanted to call that out, that I think in order to get the affordable housing and be around that FAR mark, that means a certain number of units, which means a certain number of parking stalls, because we have our minimum requirements.
Thanks, Mr. Richardson. Any other commissioners want to weigh in on this before I open it up for a vote? Okay, so Mr. Richardson.
Chair Baker, it looks like Commissioner Hood had.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Hood, I don't see. I apologize. I wasn't intentionally trying to pass you up. Commissioner Hood, are you there? Oh, I see it now.
Hello, Commissioner Baker.
Yep. Yes.
Are you able to hear me now?
I am now.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a few statements. One, I support this development. I like that the developer went back and forth and had a good relationship with the city as part of this process. I like that they got approval from a district council that always hasn't been very, very pro housing. I like that it has an affordable housing complex, or excuse me, a component to it. I think that these are really great elements, and this is the exact type of development that I want to see in my neighborhood. That being said, I visited the site. I've walked around the site. I've spent a lot of time in that area. It really is, like, when you talk about the slope, it really is pretty profound. And I do think that this is very much a unique property. When it's all parceled together, it's a very much unique property. And the challenges that they're talking about, I think, are very unique to this. I also want to make a quick comment on how our comprehensive plan filters down into our zoning. I feel like we have these ambitions that we have embedded within our comprehensive plan, but when it comes to zoning, we're still worrying about setbacks to a couple feet to the left, couple feet to the right. And I feel that it's just very frustrating that we've created this system that's planned by numbers that doesn't actually, I think, embody what our comprehensive plan is about. So those are just my comments, and those are just a quick few thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Commissioner Hood. I will entertain. I see Commissioner Tagia.
Sorry, just Chair, I wanted to second what Commissioner Hood said just now about kind of the interaction between the comp plan and the zoning code as stated. And as much as I agree with a lot of the things I'd like to see on this site, including affordable housing, I recognize that this FAR bonus was specifically, the FARs and that kind of stuff as RM2 was specifically considered by the city and specifically put forward at the levels they are set at. And the implication of that is really that on smaller sites limited by setback, you can't, it's very challenging to build affordable housing. I think it just underscores the need for things like the inclusionary zoning study to actually look at changing the code to make it more realistic to build affordable units on a wider range of sites. So I share his frustration.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion at this time. Or have I already? I don't think I did that. I think we just went into discussion. Commissioner Grill?
Well, I think we should just see where we're at. So I will make a motion, and you're going to have to bear with me while I do it. I'm going to make a motion to deny the staff recommendation and approve the variances. And I'm going to do that based on findings 2A, 2C, and 3D. And so for 2A, and there will be a longer written version of this available if this goes anywhere. 2A, I think the condition is met. It's an urban neighborhood. I think it's consistent. It mentions multifamily housing around arterial and collector streets. It talks about, policies LU1, LU8, LU14, LU35. Does talk a lot about housing. And I think we're talking about an urban neighborhood. We're talking an apartment building that's not 10 stories high. We're talking about 5.5 stories. And it is smaller than items or than complexes immediately across that intersection at Lexington and Randolph. And so I think that it meets finding 2A. I have more language for that if we go there. I also think that the Matt Groveland plan talks about these policies as well. So I think the urban neighborhood format and those mixed use corridors also come up in the Matt Groveland plan. And I'll stop there for 2A. For 2C, I also think the condition is met. I don't think it would endanger health, safety, or the general welfare. I think the scale, I think you could make some arguments for. I think it just adds a variety to the neighborhood that's not currently there. And then finding 3D, I think this finding is also met. The applicant has stated those steep slopes on both axes and the jog on James Avenue, and they are unique to the property, and the property owner did not create that slope. It is more profound than the nearby parcels. And I think it makes unique challenges to create a workable plan. And I think for all of those reasons, we should deny the staff recommendation and approve the requested variances. If folks were willing to go along with that, I would like to add some additional recommendations.
So are these conditions, Commissioner Grill?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to attach some conditions. So final plans being approved by the planning commissioner or planning commission or zoning administrator shall be in substantial compliance with the plans submitted and approved as part of the application with sign off from relevant city departments. Condition 2 would be units required to be affordable shall be occupied by qualified low-income residents. Prior to receiving a certificate of occupancy for the new building or building expansion, they need to demonstrate a commitment to affordable housing through a deed restriction or other contractual agreement with the city housing or redevelopment authority, or other similar financial agreement. And they need to document the low income residents qualifications. And then the third condition would be the applicant should apply to the owner of the north-south portion of the alley right-of-way immediately to the east of the parcel to request a vacation of at least 7 feet adjacent to the parcel to allow the building footprint to shift far enough to the east to meet the front yard setback requirement. Denial of an application for alley vacation does not change an approval decision for the requested variances or conditional use permit applied.
So, thank you, Commissioner Grill. I appreciate that. Can I ask a question for your third condition? If that item isn't met, what does that mean? I guess I guess this question is to Mr. Richardson. What happens to this project?
So I'll go and then Mr. Richardson can.
Okay.
It just says it shall apply. So it doesn't say they shall apply and get.
Okay.
But it says they shall apply. Mr. Richardson, correct me if I'm incorrect.
No, that correct thing that you said is correct.
Thank
And
you so much.
that through the chair, or to the chair. The condition would be simply that the applicant submits the application. I believe it would be to MnDOT. We'd have to figure that out for sure. I talked to Public Works staff and we weren't sure exactly, but I think it would be MnDOT. So just that the application be made for at least that amount. And then if it's granted, then the building is shifted. If not, then the building remains as it is in the proposed.
So what we're saying is if it's granted, the building will be shifted 7 feet to the east. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Do I have a second? Commissioner Hood.
I would like to second the motion.
All right, we have a motion for denial of staff's recommendation and approval with 3 conditions. And it was seconded by Commissioner Hood. I'd like to open this up for discussion to any of my colleagues at this time. So I'd like to say that I have been torn on this. I actually really support staff's recommendation on this. And I want to see, and I would like to see something on this site. I do struggle with the premise that the only way that this could work is to go higher. I struggle with that personally, and I just don't feel like that is always a great a great response to the concern around zoning code and other things. And I also understand the neighborhood and also understand to the degree of the building height and how that would also look in this neighborhood, and that at least that portion of the site and where it is north of Trader Joe's. I do think that it will be noticeable with the building height. So I just want to highlight, I guess, and go on record to say what I feel like I'm getting from the applicant is this is the only way that it could work. And I don't believe that is the only way that it can work. That being the case, I do want to, I would like to see something on the site because we do need housing. And I think that a way for us to potentially get there and move in that direction could be through the motion in the second. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Grill.
So this is Commissioner Grill. So the only thing, and I agree with you, I have gone back and forth on this quite a bit since I got Mr. Richardson's updated recommendation. So this is something that I did struggle with, but I keep coming back to the fact that the last time this application, before this time the application was at the committee, but the last time we saw it, it got held up because we wanted some inclusionary zoning language, and we wanted some of those things added. And we got the language that we were looking for, and the carrot that we were offering applicants was you can build higher if you add affordable housing. And as far as I can tell, or as far as I can remember, this is the first case we've seen where the applicant did exactly what we asked them to do, which was essentially we're going to give you a bonus if you include this affordable housing. And now we have somebody in front of us trying to do it, and the things that are stopping us are half a floor on the back, I think maybe less than half a floor on the back, and 7 feet in the front. That's me very much paraphrasing, and I don't want to say that in any sort of technical language. But it seems like the things that we are discussing in the scheme of things are not as big of an issue as the need for affordable housing. And so I come down on that quite a bit, but I do also think, and I'm pretty sure I have to say this for Mr. Warner, that I do agree that the language for 2C, 2D, and 2A is flexible, and I think the comprehensive plan is flexible. And we can all look at very specific ordinances or sections of the policies and see different things in them. And I think that's what's happening here for a lot of this, is that we're reading the same policy and we're seeing something else. And it's a document you can interpret. And so that's where I'm coming at it from, is just that I think they've done what we've asked them to do.
Thanks, Commissioner Grill. I see Commissioner Said and then Commissioner Riley.
Thanks, Chair. I do have a question for the Mr. Warner, and just want to see where we are right now as far as the legal wide and denying for the staff recommendation.
Chair, Commissioners,
Yes.
Good afternoon. Commissioner Said, I did not understand your question. Could you state it again, please?
Yes. I just want to say where we are right now, and as far as denying of the staff recommendation for legal wise.
Well, the reasons to grant the application articulated by Commissioner Grill and her proposal to amend the staff report so that there would be findings to support an approval are reasonable. They're factually based.
Thank you.
So, Commissioner Said, what I heard, and I guess this is my interpretation in Mr. Warner's legalese, is with this motion and second, legally, I think we would be okay.
Go ahead.
Chair and Commissioners, yes, you have a staff recommendation to approve certain aspects of the proposal, but deny the request with respect to height. That recommendation certainly has a factual basis, so that would be reasonable. Just as Commissioner Grill's analysis is also factually based, and thus going back to my zoning 101 comments, these are not easy decisions for you to make.
Thanks, Mr. Warner. Commissioner Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I was listening closely to Commissioner Grill's comments, and I think that's kind of where when Mr. Warner says we have difficult decisions, I think Commissioner Grill accurately described kind of my feeling about building in St. Paul generally. I am not afraid of height. And so I really appreciate her articulating the reasons that she did for recommending denial of the staff recommendation. And so I'm feeling a lot more confident about that kind of decision as we move forward. There was a comment I wanted to make, but I don't remember what it is. Oh, I know. Things always sound scarier than they are when they are built. And I think that the canebrick on East 7th might be a good example of something that, folks worked hard to get close to what neighborhood folks wanted. And now that it's been there a few years, people feel a lot more comfortable with it. And so I think that the conversation and the information that Commissioner Grill provided was very helpful to me. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Riley. I'm going to go ahead and close this portion, and And we move to a vote. Just to highlight to commissioners, you are voting right now with the motion in the second that you approve this application, which means that you go against staff's recommendation or deny staff's recommendation. So hopefully you understand the rationale and there's no confusion. All right, with that, I will call for a vote.
Commissioner Hood,
Aye.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
No.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
and Chair Baker.
Yes.
5 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you. That motion passes. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Richardson and also thank you to the applicant for the just amount of time that you all have worked together to get closer and closer and closer to what we saw before. So we appreciate it. And we'll move on to our next item. Thank you. We now have the North End Community Center, the conditional use permit for multi-use community recreation center with modifications of the conditions to permit parking in the minimum front yard and principal access to be from Lawson Street, variance for the parking front setback. We have Ms. Moen with us to present, and I must say it was very interesting to me to read the staff's recommendation because it was like staff talking about itself, so to speak, with it being the city. So it was just very interesting. It was a great read. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair Baker. And let me know when you can see the presentation. Can you all see my screen? I think you're on mute, Chair Baker, but I'm going to assume yes.
Yes, we
okay.
can see.
Thank you. Chair Baker, zoning committee members, my name is Menika Mohan. I'm a planner, and I was actually here last year at this time at the last in-person zoning committee that we had before the pandemic. So it feels fortuitous to be here today to present a conditional use permit for a multi-use community recreation center located at 1025 Rice Street with modifications of conditions to permit the parking in the minimum front yard and principal access from Lawson Street, and also a variance for the parking front setback. So this is the site location. The site is around 6 acres. It's located on Rice Street between Lawson Avenue and Cook. This is a view from Rice Street looking north. I tried to take some pictures of the site, but it's 6 acres, so it's like hard to sort of capture how big it is, but generally right now it's been used as ball fields. So section 65.235 describes the conditions to approve a non-commercial use in a recreational district. There are 2 conditions that need to be modified by the Planning Commission. I'll go through these conditions first. The last condition, whenever a swimming pool is constructed, is not applicable here because they're not building a swimming pool. So section 61.502 gives the Planning Commission, after a public hearing, the ability to modify these conditions. So that's the conditions that I was just talking about, so I'll go through them right now. So the first condition, condition A, the proposed site for any of the uses permitted must have at least 1 property line abutting a major thoroughfare, and the site shall be planned as to provide a principal access directly to said major thoroughfare. So the major thoroughfare by definition is Rice Street, but the access to the site is actually on Lawson Avenue, which is considered a local street. And there's a lot of reasons for this. One, the Public Works Department, another city department, we're talking about ourselves here, does not want to have a curb cut on Rice Street. Also, in talking to the applicant, there's a lot of grade issues, so it's sort of hard to tell in the pictures, but if you've ever been to the site, it sort of dips in. So there's a lot of grade issues that would make it challenging to have the principal access on this site. Additionally, in the comp plan, there's policy T12, which states that new developments should try to minimize curb cuts if the sides can be accessed reasonably on side streets. And even though there is a new curb cut on Lawson, it's more desirable to have it on this side street versus on Rice. So we're asking for a modification on that condition. The second modification is B, that all yards shall be landscaped in trees and shrubs and grass, and all landscaping shall be maintained in a healthy condition. And there should be no parking structures permitted in the minimum yards. And so again, there is a parking lot right here that is in that minimum yard. And so there's actually 5 parking spaces that are in that required front yard. But allowing the parking in the front yard won't impair the health and safety of the community, and it actually allows the greatest use of the space, ensuring that there's enough green space as part of the community center. So condition B, and then those are the conditions you have to modify, but in the RT1 zoning district, a community center is considered a conditional use, and so conditional uses must meet 5 standards. And I'll go through those right now. So the first condition is that the extent and location and intensity of the use will be in compliance with our comp plan, and this condition is met. The comp plan identifies the site as a recreation center in the Parks, Recreation, Open Space chapter. Additionally, the site is located in the metropolitan area's concentrated poverty ACP 50 census tracts, where at least half the residents are people of color, and at least 40% of the residents live below the 185% of the federal poverty line. So the investment in the rec center and in the area identified as an ACP 50 is consistent with policy PR1 in the comp plan to ensure equitable access to parks and recreation programs and resources, and policy PR5 to prioritize investment in the physical assets of community centers, play areas, pools, and other amenities. Additionally, a conditional use permit for a recreational facility would be consistent with the identified community and recreation centers in the Parks, Recreation, Open Space chapter identified in the comp plan. It's also in the comp plan identified as an urban neighborhood, and that is also consistent use, and it is consistent with the North End District's Plan policy PR3 to improve parks, rec, and recreation centers. So condition B, the use will provide adequate ingress and egress to minimize traffic congestion in public streets. So this condition is met. The project is providing this new curb cut on Lawson Avenue, and it has access to the parking lot. And there'll be pedestrian instances right at the corner of Rice and Lawson Avenue, and there will be pedestrian gates off of Cook to access the new fields. Additionally, there will be 12 bicycle parking spaces provided on site, and it's located on the 62 bus route. Condition C, the use will not be detrimental to the existing character of the development in the immediate neighborhood or endanger the public health, safety, and general welfare. This condition is met. The recreation center will add to the neighborhood character and increase access to the public health resources through new recreational fields and a lot of new community services such as the teen center. Condition D, the use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. This condition is also met. The rec center is consistent with past uses as a ball field and complementary to the existing land uses in the neighborhood. It also won't prevent future zoning development or future development that is consistent with the comp plan and the existing zoning. And the last condition, the use shall in all other respects conform to the applicable regulations of the district in which it's located. This condition can be met subject to the approval of the setback variance for parking and the modification of the condition for no parking in the minimum required front yard, and modification that the principal use is from a local street instead of a major thoroughfare. So this is the code section that regulates setbacks for parking. In the RT1, setbacks for parking should not be in the required front yard, which is 25 feet in the RT1 district. This proposed community recreation center is designed with Lawson Avenue side as the front yard. That is where the major overhangs are, so that makes it the front yard per zoning. And with 5 new parking spaces, it should be the setback is 7 feet from the property line, necessitating the variance. So there are conditions that the 6 conditions that must be met when applying for a variance, and I'll go through those now. Finding A, that the variance is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the zoning code. So something happened to my slides and these got messed up. So if I can just stop sharing for a minute and share my screen instead, that would be great. So let me just stop.
Okay.
Let me see. Just let me know when you can see.
We can see.
Okay. Great. Okay. So the variance is in harmony with the general purposes intent of the zoning code. This finding is met. So allowing the proposed 7-foot setback for 5 of the parking spaces allows the greatest use of site, provides for convenient access to the parking lot, and will not impair the health and safety and general welfare of the community. Additionally, this is Lawson Avenue. The community center isn't facing any front yards, it's all side yards, so that's consistent with the aesthetics of the neighborhood. I already went through how the variance is consistent with a comprehensive plan, so this finding is met. The applicant has established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the provision and that the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner. This finding is met. The variance is necessary to increase the amount of programmable space for the community. Additionally, due to the size and grade and orientation and future uses on the site, Lawson Avenue is the best location for the parking lot. Without this variance, the parking lot would impact the multi-purpose field, which is here, and move other park green space closer to the street. So here. The plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. This finding is met. For more than 50 years, the site was a recreational ball field. A 25-foot setback would impede on the ability to program for the space for the new multi-use community center. The variance will not permit any uses that are not allowed in the zoning district where the affected land is located. This finding is met. This use, a recreation center, is conditionally permitted in the RT1 district. If the conditional use permit is approved, it will be consistent with RT1 zoning. And finding F, the variance will not alter the essential character of the surrounding area. This finding is also met. The use is conditionally permitted committed in the existing zoning district and is consistent with surrounding development. The proposed multi-use community center is consistent with the type of development the comprehensive plan supports. We did receive a letter of support for the variance from the North End Community Neighborhood Organization that was included in your packet. And based on the findings above, staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit for the rec center with modifications of conditions to permit parking in the minimum front yard and principal access to be from Lawson Avenue, and a variance for the front setback, 25-foot minimum, 7-foot proposed on a property located at 1025 Rice Street, subject to the following conditions: that the final plans be approved by the zoning administrator for this use and shall be in substantial compliance with the plan submitted and approved as part of this application. And then I did have from the applicant or the Recs department a couple pictures here of just what the front of the building is proposed to look like. They've been in design conversations since 2019, and they'll probably continue until 2021. And the timing of the rec center is really dependent on financing. So that's all I have for you.
Thank you so much. And is it pronounced Mohan or Mohan?
Mohan.
Mohan. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mohan. Any questions or comments from Ms. Mohan, from my colleagues? All right. Thank you, and we will more than likely be calling you back. I will now move forward to ask the applicant if they would like to add anything to staff's report.
Hi, this is Chris Stark. I'm the applicant from Parks and Recreation.
This is what I'm saying. Nice to meet you, Mr. Stark. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Sure. My name is Chris Stark. I live at 4152 Aldrich Avenue South, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was an excellent staff report. I think it covered all of our concerns and things that we wanted to address in the building. We really wanted to activate Rice Street and hopefully share programming with the library across Lawson Avenue, which positioned the building in that location. It also provides good access to public transportation, which is important, I think, for this facility. And as Ms. Mohan mentioned, the grading on site causes some challenges to do anything right off of Rice Street. In fact, when you enter the North End Community Center, you'll be entering the second level or the middle level. There's a sort of a walkout basement feel, which is how people will access it from the parking lot. And so that really led us to put the parking lot access from Lawson Avenue, and in doing so, positioning it where it is relative to the setback provides more opportunities for the multipurpose fields and also the stormwater management, which is underground. But we're really excited about the project. It's great. I think it's a great addition to this community. And so we appreciate you hearing it today.
Thanks, Mr. Stark. Any questions from my colleagues to Mr. Stark? The one question I have, Mr. Stark, is in the staff, well, actually, Ms. Mohan said it. It was funding, so the building moving forward was kind of contingent on funding. Do you have an idea of when you all are trying to move forward with actually construction?
Yeah, we're hoping as soon as possible. We have $4 million to start. Obviously, the design is pretty far along. Okay. Our goal was to get to a shovel-ready project, pending funding from either the state or federal government, which Ward 5 is working hard on with the community.
Okay.
We don't have a definitive schedule yet at this point. Ideally, it could happen this year in 2021, but it's entirely dependent on what we receive.
So what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Stark, is some things need to align federally and locally funding-wise for that to happen. Okay. If there are no other questions or comments for Mr. Stark, I will move forward and open up the public hearing for this application. So I officially open up the public hearing for this application. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? And again, is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Hearing none, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition for this application? And lastly, is there anyone here to speak in opposition for this application? Hearing none, I officially close the public hearing for this application, and I move forward and turn it over to my colleagues to entertain discussion or a motion. All right, I see a few people. I see Commissioner, my screen is still coming up. Commissioner Riley.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Thanks, Ms. Mohan and Mr. Stark. I don't have any questions. I would like to move the staff recommendation.
All right. I have a motion to move forward staff's recommendation for approval of the conditional use permit and the variances. I have, do I have a second? I see Commissioner Grill.
Yep, I'd like to second that motion.
All right, we have a second. I would like to move into discussion. Any discussion from my colleagues? Okay, this window is closing. Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. I'd like to move for a vote.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Rangel Morales,
Yes.
and Chair Baker.
Yes.
7 in favor, 0 opposed.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Mohan, and also to the applicant. We will move on to our next item. This is Lexington Landing Phase 2. It's a conditional use permit for a 50 feet building height at 1950 Albion Avenue, in the northwest corner at West 7th Street. And to bring forward the staff report, we have Ms. Dadlis.
Thank you, Chair Baker and Commissioners. Again, my name is Katie Dadlis, and I'm a planner assigned to the Highland Park neighborhood. Someone let me know that you can hear me.
We can.
Great. Okay. And I will go ahead and show my screen. And if somebody can tell me that they can see my screen, that would be helpful.
We can see your screen.
Terrific. Okay, great. So as the chair said, the conditional use permit request before you today is to allow for a 50-foot high building. And I just wanted to orient people to the site a little bit here. So we're talking about phase 2 of the Lexington Landing development. This triangular parcel here is the location of the site, and the part that's outlined in blue is the location for the second phase. This is the eastern portion of that triangular site and the site of the former Riverview School. Some commissioners might remember that this site was rezoned from R4 to T3 a few years ago. The Lexington Landing Phase 1 is to the west of Phase 2, and it houses some memory care, some assisted living, as well as some independent senior living. It's about 154 units, I think, in a building height there of about 58 feet. And Lexington Parkway was realigned as part of the development and now separates phase 1 from phase 2. There are some office and commercial uses on the south side of West 7th Street, as well as on either side of Albion, and some commercial uses immediately across Albion Street here. It's a post office and some surface parking, and then surrounded by lower density residential uses. And then the R1 area here is Highland Park. Just real quick to show you the area in the foreground here is the location of phase 2. This portion here is the realigned Lexington Parkway, and West 7th Street is in the foreground. This is the first phase of the development. It was completed in December of 2020 and began to be occupied at that time. This is just immediately across the street on the south side of West 7th Street. I believe it's the St. Paul School District offices, the Highland Nursery to the south as well, a gas station and convenience store, kind of kitty corner. This is the post office site immediately to the west, or to the east, on the east side of Albion, and then just a few shots of the lower density residential uses around, around the triangular site. And then I just wanted to land here on the site plan and show that again. So I'll just point out, this is the, old Lexington Avenue here. This is the triangular parcel. This is the first phase of the development that's been completed. This is the location of the proposed development, and here is how Lexington Parkway has been realigned and separates the two parcels, and the signal that was at Albion Avenue has been relocated here to realigned Lexington Parkway. The applicant owns the property. They propose a market rate rental senior living community there. It's proposed to be a 4-story building with 92 units. Vehicle access on the site will be from Albion. You can see here, it'll provide access to some surface parking spaces, a turnaround entryway here, and then also access to parking below ground. There'll be a pedestrian access here as well as at the corner here at Lexington and 7th Street. The maximum building height for multiple family structures in the T3 zoning district is 45 feet, and so a conditional use permit is needed to provide for the additional height. They're requesting a maximum height of 50 feet, though they anticipate the building height to be 46 to 48 feet, and they're requesting just a little bit extra just to provide some flexibility as design happens as they move forward. There are 5 findings that are required to be met for all conditional uses. The first relates to consistency with the comprehensive plan, and the staff finds that to be met. The area is a mixed-use area. It's also a neighborhood node, and there are a number of policies in the comp plan that call for encouraging and supporting transit-supportive density and directing growth and new housing to the areas with the highest existing or planned transit capacity to meet demand for living in walkable, transit-accessible neighborhoods. And West 7th Street is a future transit line for a modern streetcar. The next finding that's required to be met is that there's adequate ingress and egress to prevent congestion in the public street. And as I noted, access is proposed to be provided along Albion Street, and the applicant has submitted for site plan review, and Public Works staff has reviewed the site plan for that. The third finding relates to the use not being detrimental to existing character of development in the neighborhood or endangering public health, safety, and general welfare, and staff finds that condition to be met as well. This senior living community is an appropriate use along the future transit corridor, existing transit corridor, and future modern streetcar corridor, where increased density can help to support the transit there. The fourth finding relates to not using relates to the use not impeding normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property, and staff finds that condition to be met as well. The proposed use, including the height, will not prevent future development that's consistent with the comprehensive plan and existing zoning. And the final finding relates to the use conforming to the applicable regulations of the district, and staff finds that condition to be met as well. And so based on these findings, staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit to allow a building height of 50 feet, subject to the condition detailed in the staff report. And just finally, I'd like to add that the Highland Park District Council did vote to support the conditional use permit, and that letter is in your staff packet. To my knowledge, no letters or comments in support or opposition have been received. That's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Ms. Dallas. I feel like you just provided a lot of information, so we appreciate it. I see Commissioner.
Hi. So a couple of questions. Sorry, I think we're getting some feedback.
I hear it as well.
Yeah. Okay, I think it's gone. So I live in this neighborhood between West 7th and Lexington. And so what we lovingly call the Midas wedge, because that's the only thing we have in the neighborhood. And so first off, I'm just very excited about any more neighbors. But I didn't, in the packet, there wasn't a like a side elevation or any pictures of the building besides that top view. And I was wondering if you or the applicant have that for when we're discussing it, because the first phase of the building along West 7th is just a solid wall. And it's actually kind of shocking, like when you walk down it, how massive and how little access there is. And I think that's because it's memory care. And so I'm understanding of that particular building, but I'm just curious if the portion that's facing West 7th for the senior apartments is going to have the same sort of effect, or if it's going to be a little bit more street scale.
Chair Baker and Commissioner Grill, I will ask the applicant that when they have a chance to speak, if they have that, to share that. I don't believe it was submitted with the application, and I went into the site plan review application as well, and I don't recall seeing elevations. So we'll see if they have those available.
Thanks, Commissioner Grill. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thanks, Ms. Dadlis. I will call up the applicant at this time. Would you like to add anything to the staff's report?
Aye.
Yeah, we're all scrambling to find that elevation because I know we have it.
Would you, if you're planning to speak, could you provide your name and address for the record?
I'm Steve Coons, 26381 Thomas Avenue, Elko, Newmarket. Developer with EDI, representing the Weedham Foundation. We also have Scott Black, my partner, on, and Jay Ports, the president of the J.A. Weedham Foundation, is here as well. So, first of all, thank you, Ms. Dadlis, for your report and your recommendations. As far as the elevations, I don't know, Scott, if you've been able to find them. I can pull something up here shortly too. We are really mimicking the look and feel of the first phase of the building, so it will be very similar. See if I can. Does this work here?
We do see your screen, yes.
Okay, so it's hard to tell on these elevations, but it is really the same look and feel right along West 7th as the first phase of the building is, meeting the required setbacks, I believe of 10 feet at that from the sidewalk there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Commissioner Grill, does that answer your question or provide perspective?
Maybe if I could add it, this is Scott Black. Again, with EDI, my address is 1545 Arden Place, Arden Hills, Minnesota. The bottom elevation, Steve, if you can zoom in on it, does show the West 7th side of the building. And I know what you're talking about. It does seem monolithic. We've gotten those comments before. A couple things I'll add. The landscaping has not yet been totally completed, and we're at that kind of brown time of year, hoping that greens up a little bit. And the building itself grows as you go down West 7th. You'll see it kind of comes out of the ground a little bit. We have the opposite of that on this side of West 7th, and we were conscious as we were going through staff review to make sure that we have entry point here over, right there. That's on West 7th. And then as you slide down, there is a patio area similar to what's across the street, only not as high up off the ground. And then it does also have street access there too. So to answer your question, we're trying for it to be real friendly. You also have decks and units that have outside entrances along that way. Unlike what you said, the memory care does run along a good portion of West 7th on the first phase of the building. Those residents access an exterior courtyard at the end of the building.
Thanks, Mr. Black. Commissioner Grill?
Answer my question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess I'll open up to my colleagues. Any questions for the applicants? All right, hearing none. If there is anything that you'll need to respond to during public comment or our public hearing, we'll call you back up. I'll go ahead and officially open the public hearing for this application. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? And again, is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Hearing none, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? And again, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? All right, hearing none, I officially close the public hearing for this application, and I will entertain a motion or discussion from my colleagues. I see Commissioner Grill, I think.
Yep, I'd like to make a motion to move the staff recommendation of a conditional use permit for a maximum building height of 50 feet at 915 Albion Avenue, subject to the following condition. Final plans approved by the zoning administrator for this use shall be in substantial compliance with the plans submitted and approved as part of this application.
Thank you. I have a motion on the table. Is there a second? Commissioner Tagia.
Yes, I'd like the second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I open it up for discussion. All right, hearing none, we have a motion and a second and no discussion. I guess that window is closing. And I'll go ahead and move to a vote.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Ringo Morales,
Yes.
and Chair Baker.
Yes.
7 in favor, 0 opposed.
All right, that motion passes. Thanks, Ms. Dadlis, for the staff report, and also I want to thank the applicants as well. We'll move on to our last item for this evening. It is Grand Cleveland Parking Lot. It's a site plan review for a parking lot condition amendment at 2115 Summit Avenue, the northwest corner of Grand and Cleveland. And to provide the staff report and presentation is Mr. Williams, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Can you all see and hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you.
Oh, wait.
We can see you.
Said my system is being a little weird. Apologies. Chair Baker, Commissioners, good to be here. I will be sharing a brief presentation. Is that showing up on your screens? Should you say University of St. Thomas Lot K?
It is.
Okay, great. Thank you. Chair, Commissioners, the case before you for consideration right now is a little unusual, both in regards to the circumstances that bring us here tonight, and sort of the format of the staff report, which are related. You'll notice that to that point, a lot of the findings in the staff report deal with sort of the history of the site. So I want to talk about that a little bit beyond what's in my staff report, but I would refer you to that, which gives you sort of the blow by blow from 2004, 2005 to where we are today with regard to this particular 33 space parking lot at the northwest corner of Grand and Cleveland on the St. Thomas campus. So part of that history is the expansion of the St. Thomas campus. So in the image in front of you, you'll see two blue blocks. That's the traditional north and south. This was not created in GIS, so there's not a north arrow, but it is the standard Northern Hemisphere, north is up orientation. So north campus up here, south campus down here. This is the older core of the campus. In 2003, roughly, the University of St. Thomas began an effort after having purchased some property to add this area in green to their campus. So bounded by Cretin Avenue on the west, Cleveland Avenue on the east, and then between Grand and Summit Avenues. If this were an aerial view, or if you're familiar with the area, you would note that the character of that area in terms of built form of that 2-block area is a little bit different than the campus, which speaks to why we have campus CUPs to approve where a campus can be in the city in a residential district, because the uses tend to be a little bit different than your typical residential neighborhood. In any event, it was somewhat controversial. Eventually, a CUP was issued by the city. There was also a lawsuit around the expansion, but that CUP, which was attached as an attachment with your staff report, sort of spelled out a number of things that are typical for a campus CUP regarding parking, building heights and setbacks, but it also talked quite a bit about how this 2-block area being added to the campus would function. And one of the key things was that in addition to academic buildings being built on the property, the CUP talked about on this next slide, this area outlined in yellow, which happens to be the parking lot that is the subject of today's hearing, being a site for construction of a residential or mixed-use building. And if I know we have representatives of St. Thomas here, if I've misrepresented or missed something, they can add to that. We also have there may be a number of folks here for the hearing who could add to that during testimony. But that is the basics of it. So you'll notice on the previous slide, I highlighted this area and you see McNeely Hall. McNeely Hall is this academic building. This was a site plan for this building was approved in 2005, and that included the construction of this surface parking lot here, again at the northwest corner of Grand and Cleveland Avenues, and Summit is just here to the north. As noted in the staff report, at the time of that site plan approval, the Planning Commission found that use of that corner for a surface parking lot, given what was in the conditional use permit for the campus, which had recently been approved, found that a parking lot was not entirely consistent with that conditional use permit. The compromise, because St. Thomas had no plans for development of that parking lot other than the surface parking lot proposed as part of the McNeely Hall site plan. The compromise was to allow that parking lot to be constructed and remain at that corner for a period of 10 years. Now, since that time, as noted in the staff report, the university has come back twice, in each case with the support of the district council and the West Summit Neighborhood Advisory Committee, to extend the deadline for that parking lot. The original condition and the conditions as amended through Planning Commission action was that as the period of approval for that parking lot expired, it would be removed and returned to green space of some sort. We are now actually today at the date of expiration of the second extension of allowing that parking lot to remain. Now, if you recall, the key issue at the time of the approval was the conditional use permit, which allowed expansion of the campus to include the 2 blocks and how those 2 blocks would be used. The conditional use permit is essentially a way to help manage a campus as a whole bundle of uses. So if you think about a college or university campus, it includes a bunch of things. There's dining halls, there are residence halls, there are classroom buildings, there's a physical plant. In the case of St. Thomas, there's there are some parking facilities and a student center. Not all of those things are allowed, and certainly their physical size and arrangement is different than your typical residentially zoned district in St. Paul. That is, that buildings tend to be larger. There are some uses that generally wouldn't be allowed, and they're arranged in a different manner than a typical block and lot development pattern. And that is the reason for the CUP. A number of things, as noted in the staff report, have occurred in addition to extending the expiration deadline for this particular parking lot since its original approval in 2005. Most notably, in 2020, 2 new dormitories opened up on the St. Thomas campus. One designated for first-year students, one designated for second-year students. They have not, unfortunately, been able to open to their full intended occupancy due to the public health emergency that is resulting in us meeting via Teams tonight rather than in person. But they have nonetheless opened, and St. Thomas has put in place what could be described as a residency requirement for first and second year students. Going back to that 2004 campus CUP approval, one of the key issues for both the neighborhood and for the university was how to house students. This area is covered by the student housing overlay. One of the main reasons for that is that, leading up to the 2004 expansion, St. Thomas University expanded its enrollment of undergraduates, and that created some housing demand. As evidenced by both the West Summit Neighborhood Advisory Committee and the Mac Groveland District Council recommending approval of the request by St. Thomas to allow this parking lot to remain indefinitely. Much of the overall intent of that CUP to manage the impacts of a campus. In this case, one of the key issues is student housing have been met. That being said, it is staff's determination, as noted in the last two findings, or stated in the last two findings, that this key issue that came up at the time of the 2005 site plan approval for McNeely Hall, namely that use of this particular corner, the northwest quadrant of the intersection of Cleveland and Grand, use as a parking lot was found not to be consistent with the site plan. Given the developments on the campus, the imposition by the university of a residency requirement, it is staff's judgment that the intent of that CUP is largely met, and therefore the use of this parking, of this corner as a parking lot, while not ideal in the grand scheme of things, I think I would say as a general principle that surface parking lots are not a real efficient use of land. It is consistent with the overall intent of the site plan. On top of that, St. Thomas proposes to use this parking lot, including the revenue generated by the lease of portions of the lot to Devani's Pizza, which you can see on the image here just to the south across Grand Avenue, to support modes of transportation other than single or low vehicle occupancy driving. That is all consistent with the overall intent of the site plan, of the campus CUP. And the tie is that both the site plan and the CUP are required to be consistent with the comp plan. So it is staff's recommendation that the condition placed on the original 2005 site plan approval and then subsequently amended twice to allow the parking lot to remain longer, that condition should be removed by action of the zoning committee and the planning commission here in 2021. That would allow that parking lot to remain indefinitely. It does not prescribe what happens in the parking lot in that future. And the only condition of approval is that because St. Thomas is, as shown here, proposing, some changes to the site plan. I should have put to this slide earlier, that involve electric vehicle charging stations, adding some bike racks, some landscaping improvements, including both new trees and pollinator gardens, that staff will work with the University of St. Thomas to get those final plans for those improvements approved administratively through the Department of Safety and Inspections and the zoning administrator. But the staff recommendation is for approval. And that concludes my, this summarizes that recommendation here.
Thanks, Mr. Williams. I'd open it up to my colleagues for questions for Mr. Williams. I see Commissioner Ringo Morales.
Mr. Williams, could you comment on the the open space regulations that would apply to a site like this? Like overall, the entire campus of St. Thomas, or is it regulated by any form of required open space or green space?
Thank you, Chair, and I'm just gonna turn off my sharing. I know that our zoning secretary, Ms. Langer, has prepared some slides in their place. There is no, and please, one of my colleagues step in if I'm misrepresenting here. There's no specific open space requirement for a campus. One of the unique things about a campus is that regardless of the underlying zoning district, the campus CUP sort of supplants our typical dimensional standards like lot coverage or other things that might apply. In this case, those other things would be building height, setback. So there is no particular open space requirement in this case.
Thanks. I see Commissioner Hood and then Commissioner Tagia.
Thank you, Chair Baker. So question for Mr. Williams. It seems like what would be consistent with the conditional use permit would be to simply extend this further, right? So instead of approving it into perpetuity, that it would be saying, let's grant another 5 to 10 year extension. It feels like that would be consistent with the conditional use permit, correct?
Chair Baker, Commissioner Hood, that's a great question. So I do not believe that there is anyone present on the zoning committee today who was a member of the zoning committee at the time of the 2018 hearing, but which last extended the deadline on the use of this corner as a parking lot. But the general feeling was that it was creating a lot of work for everyone to continue to extend this on a temporary basis. So that's sort of one response is that what is being proposed here, and which I would again note it is supported by both the Mac Groveland Community Council, which is the district council where the property is located, as well as the West Summit Neighborhood Advisory Committee, which itself a bit unused. Yes.
Josh, little follow-up question though. It seems though, regardless of whether it was a lot of work, it was put in there to be a hindrance because the community did want to see this surface parking lot at a, what could be a very prominent commercial corridor be gone, right? It's not something that they necessarily wanted. So it seems to me, and maybe I'm reading this incorrectly, but the temporary restriction was consistent regardless of how much of a hassle it is for the city or the university.
Thank you.
Or was it, or was it because they had plans to put housing in that middle campus area?
Thank you, Commissioner Hood, Chair Baker. That's a good question. So I guess my take on it is that a lot has changed since 2005. So the expansion of the St. Thomas campus was very contentious. In fact, that is one of the reasons why we have the West Summit Neighborhood Advisory Committee to create that was created by an action of the city council to provide a forum for discussions between the university and various neighborhood constituencies. So it includes both, West Neck includes not only representatives of the university, but also of the two district councils, which overlap with the campus, as well as Neighbors United and SARPA, the Summit Avenue Residential Preservation Association. And I by no means mean to dismiss that history or anything that has happened since. However, it was 15 years ago at the time that St. Thomas expanded. I was not even working for the city yet. So I can't tell you precisely what the plans the university had at that time were for expansion. I can tell you that the CUP itself was very much negotiated in terms of, preserving the residential character of Summit Avenue. There's a requirement that a number of the houses there remain regardless of their internal use. It was restricting the number of academic buildings and housing that could be built on that 2-block expansion. In regards to the corner itself that's in question, I agree that a parking lot is not the highest and best use. And in fact, prior to St. Thomas owning that corner, there was a gas station there, which would make 3 of the 4 corners of that intersection. Because if you go east, there is a service station or a car repair business to the south of Grand and east
I believe
of Cleveland.
I believe that was the old Oasis Mart.
Yeah, well, you may be correct. I don't know.
You'll have to take my word on that one, Josh. Thank you for answering my questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Mr. Williams. I see Commissioner Tagiao.
Yes, just a similar vein of questioning to Commissioner Hood. I'm genuinely trying to wrap my head around this one. So when I look at it with fresh eyes, I see Neely Hall is there. It's attractive. It's set back from the street. It seems to make sense, and if you were to try and build a new building on that lot in that position, you'd have a number of just challenges given the remaining space. What I'm zooming in on is the reasoning in the staff report says, okay, now that the campus has built housing elsewhere, there's no need to build housing on that site. And so we can kind of, remove this condition. But I'm curious about the reasoning in 2018. I definitely want to try and understand it. It seems pretty strong in that the Planning Commission independently objected to the parking lot use indefinitely on its merit. It said, look, we don't really, whether or not housing gets built on this site, if housing doesn't get built, we want this returned. And in fact, we want a financial surety of $100,000 that this really will be returned to green space. And the fact that the large new student housing is being built elsewhere on the site doesn't seem to, at least to my mind, upend that reasoning, right? Because the condition was very much, okay, whether or not you build housing, whether or not your master plan ends up housing in a different place, we really want independently not to have a parking lot there. So I wonder if, Josh, having been there at the time, you could speak to why was this such a strong piece of reasoning to the level of financial sureties in 2018 when this was last extended?
Mr. Williams, before you respond, I just want to highlight to commissioners, I'm going to move forward after Mr. Williams' response to Commissioner Tagiao to Commissioner Grill, and then that'll be our last question for Mr. Williams so we can hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Chair Baker, Commissioner Tagiao. I guess in response, I would say that, the 2018 resolution, that financial surety is, it's a pretty, I shouldn't say common because the situations that warrant it don't arise that often, but it is a way for the city to, it gives us an enforcement tool. So if you think about a CUP or a site plan approval, they're generally permissive rather than directive. By that, I mean that anyone can come in and apply for a conditional use permit or a site plan, and that application will be evaluated according to what our code says about it and our standard procedures, whether it's administrative review or review by the Planning Commission. But we can't force the applicant to build what they propose to build, if that makes sense. In this case, we have something that was constructed, and the original condition of approval was that it should be removed at a time where it was deemed that it had been there long enough to be consistent with sort of the overall intent of this conditional use permit that guides the campus boundaries, but again is, in my view at least, more permissive than directive. So first I would say that, give it that context. So it was there not necessarily as, and that condition of approval was recommended by staff, in this case me, both in 2015 and 2018. But again, it was merely that, if we tell St. Thomas they have to remove a parking lot, we don't have a lot of tools to enforce that. But if we require that they put up a bond or other financial surety, that gives the city the unilateral ability to go in and, enforce that condition, which in this case requires, action. It's not just that you judge whether or not the condition is met. It actually would require someone going in and removing the parking lot. The size of that financial the surety was based on, a rough estimate of the cost. I guess the second part of the answer would be that you need to consider or I would consider rather, the 2005 original decision and the 2015 and then 2018 decision sort of as part of a whole, that we looked back in as the original deadline in 2015 approached. Folks looked back and said, does it make sense? St. Thomas was in the middle of a campus planning process, and everyone, and when I say everyone, I mean city staff, the planning commission, the applicant, and the both West Summit Neighborhood Advisory Committee and McAllister Groveland said, well, let's put this off for a few years. Subsequent to that, the St. Thomas completed their campus master plan, which was undertaken, by the way, under a new St. Thomas administration, which speaks to sort of the dynamics of any institution as large as St. Thomas and their long-term planning and decision-making. And so those should all be viewed together rather than, I would caution reading the 2018 resolution as a strenuous recommendation by the zoning committee.
I see Commissioner Grill.
So I'm stuck on the same issues as the other commissioners. The phrase "a permanent parking lot" is not consistent with the St. Thomas Cup approved in August 2004, which shows housing at this location. It's easy to get stuck on that. And I appreciate some of the later items when they're talking about adding landscaping and some of the benefits of the parking lot, but it does seem like we are doing the exact opposite of what was recommended, which I'm a little uncomfortable with. I like when there's some gray area, and this seems less like that than I would hope. And so I guess I just want to throw in with the others that I'm a little uncomfortable about the indefinite nature of this.
Do you want to quickly respond to that, Mr. Williams? Because I'm going to move on.
Yes, please, I would. Chair Baker and Commissioner Grill, I understand that. I guess I would argue that, again, that language was brought forward from 2005, and I think the facts on the ground, as it were, have changed significantly since that time. In that time, in addition to the new 2 student residents that were recently constructed, you have a brand new student center, a new athletic center, giant parking ramp, all of which has significantly changed the layout of St. Thomas as a campus. And that's in addition to McNeely Hall. So I think, looking at it through the lens of 2005 and an approval for a building that wasn't yet built, it needs to be filtered a bit. As far as, whether or not there's a gray area, my opinion is that, the body of facts here suggests that one can come to a different conclusion regarding consistency with the CUP now here in 2021 than in 2005. Obviously, as staff, I'm only here to make a recommendation, and that the commission needs to decide, or excuse me, the zoning committee needs to decide if they're comfortable with that. But I would stand behind my recommendation.
Okay. I'd like to call forward the applicant or applicants at this time. Do you want to add anything to Mr. Williams' report and presentation?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Baker, and thank you, Josh. I'm Amy McDonough. I am the Chief of Staff for President Julie Sullivan at St. Thomas. So I'm part of that new administration that Josh talked about a little bit. And I just want to say we really appreciate Josh for really digging in. He knows so much about our campus and about all of the different zoning laws that regulate what we do. And it's confusing. This is a very confusing parking lot, and so it's hard to be new and look at this one because it has a lot of layers. So, but I want to stress that when we came to the Planning Commission, and my colleague Amy Gage, who's the Director of Neighborhood and Community Relations, is here with me, so I encourage her to speak up too about this. They really encouraged us, you know, St. Thomas, you need to come back with a more permanent proposal. We don't want to do this anymore. So we tried to respond to what the the zoning committee commissioners said to us at that point. We also tried to respond to what our neighbors were telling us they want. And I can't stress enough how significant it is that we made that huge leap for housing. The neighbors have been wanting St. Thomas to build more housing on campus and also to enact a residency requirement for first and second year students. And so this is the first time in our history that we've ever done that before. And that was a huge benefit to the neighbors and something that they've been asking for a long time. So as we discuss this lot with them, that's just really key. They really felt like this zoning issue was keeping pressure on us to build more housing on campus, and we built more housing on campus than we ever could have built on that corner. I mean, the size of our residence halls on the North Campus are pretty big. We added 480 beds to one building and 260 beds to the other. So we are going to be able to house all freshmen and sophomores on campus for their first 2 years of college. And our neighbors have been asking us, especially to get sophomores, most of our freshmen already live on campus, but to get sophomores back on campus. So that's been really a huge benefit to the neighbors, and they recognize that when we brought this proposal forward to them. And then we also recognize that this lot has a lot of uses for the community as well. Bob Stupka is here from Devani's, and having those spaces available for him, especially during COVID when it's been such a hard time for businesses like that, has been key. And McNeely Hall is one of the buildings that we use on campus for community events. So a lot of community groups rent out that room, and that parking lot has been key for that. It's also a voting site. So we love having a voting site on campus. It's so good for our first-time voters, students, but also just our neighbors use that too when they come to vote on campus. So we tried to come up with kind of a compromise. We know parking lots are not ideal. We have a huge sustainability campus plan at St. Thomas, and we want our students to use more multimodal transportation. So we tried to combine that into the lot. So my kids were teasing me that a multimodal parking lot is a little bit of an oxymoron, right? But we tried to say, let's add more bike racks, which is something that we need on campus and the neighbors want as well. And then let's add some charging stations that not just campus members can use, but neighbors can use as well. And that was something that was really embraced by the community. So I know walking into this new is really confusing because it has had so many layers of debate over the years, and this particular lot has been used to put pressure on St. Thomas to build more housing. So I think we feel like we're in a space to have a longer term proposal. And I totally get that maybe permanent is too strong of a word, and what we're looking for is we were trying to respond to the city to say when they asked us to come forward with a more permanent proposal. So that's what we're trying to do today. So
Ms.
thank you.
Ms. McDonough, could you provide your address for the record?
Oh, sure. Yes, I'm Amy McDonough, and St. Thomas is located at 2115 Summit Avenue.
Thanks. Is there anyone else connected as an applicant wanting to speak?
Chair Baker, if I may, Amy Gage, Director of Neighborhood and Community Relations, also 2115 Summit. Amy McDonough summarized this very well. I would simply add that the restriction of some time ago, certainly more than a decade now, that we could either have housing or green space on this lot has hemmed us in. This is a very busy corner, a busy commercial corner, and I think we see greater benefit to our community, to our neighbors, to our neighboring business that Bob Stupka owns for this community-focused lot than green space. I don't think we see this as a place where people might necessarily lounge and kick back and enjoy green space. So we truly have the community in mind and bringing, yes, an admittedly unusual proposal in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak as the applicant? If not, I will open up the public hearing, officially open up the public hearing for this application. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application?
There is. My name's Bob Stupka.
All right. Could you provide your address for the record? And you have 2 minutes to provide your public testimony.
Yes, 41 South Cleveland Avenue, St. Paul, and I think I can do this in less than 2 minutes. I'm president of Devani's. As Amy McDonough mentioned, it's been a very trying time for restaurants. Ours is no exception. This parking lot is critical to our business. We've lost virtually all of our on-street parking. The parking was taken away on Cleveland Avenue, and the rest of the neighborhood is all permit parking. The 16 spots that St. Thomas allows us to use in Lot K doubles our off-street parking, and it's a godsend to our business. It's critical that we've got space for our customers. When they come, they know they're going to be able to find a place to park. So you've had a long day. I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application?
I would like to.
Hi.
Hi.
Could you provide your name and address for the record?
Hi, my name is Kathy Plessner. I live at 2038 Summit Avenue. First, thank you for serving on the zoning committee. I ask you to approve the site plan for the parking lot on this northwest corner. My heart feels that it's important to recognize the role Doug Hennis played in getting us here today. The St. Paul Planning Commission and City Council established the West Summit Neighborhood Advisory Committee, WSNAC, as an element, as Josh said, part of the CUP. Neighbor members were given 8 votes to UST's 3 votes. As Vice President of Government Relationships and Special Projects for the University of St. Thomas, Doug worked wholeheartedly and respectfully with his WSNAC colleagues to our community warriors, okay? Represented the Houston Groveland District Council in 2014 for the first extension of the Grand Fleet. It was my WSNAC baptism of fire. The 9th and the 16th of December were spent in contentious 3.5-hour negotiation meetings. The 9th began with a 40-minute PowerPoint vilifying UST. I confess to my reminder that we were discussing property that's practically my backyard, not the Gaza Strip. December 16th may have been my last WSNAC meeting if a young city planner named Josh Williams hadn't been sitting next to me. I slipped him a note. Is this normal? He wrote back, no. Josh gave me hope. In 2018, the extension meeting still felt painful, but they only lasted 1.5 hours. In my world, coming in front of you today feels like a celebration. I have watched Josh Williams foster equity, diplomatic, intelligent, unflappable, and has been consistent in the message that a parking lot on Grand.
Ms. Plessner?
Not the planning. I am, yes.
That is your time. Yeah.
Boy, I have a lot to say because Doug Hennis, can I just give Doug Hennis his words? Because he went through living hell through the war years. And it's got to change, and our district council is so in this change. He just said, can I just say that honestly, after Doug died, a person wrote, Doug's style was more, some might call it common sense, but Doug's style was more uncommon good sense. The site you vote on today will fit his concept of uncommon good sense. It supports the good of our community with keeping Devani's viable bike racks for the 2040 plan, and it's an uncommon good sense act that will put the war years in the rear view mirror and foster peace in our community. I'm telling you, this has been a war zone.
Thank you so much, Ms. Plessner. We appreciate it. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? And lastly, is there anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Mr. Williams, I see your hand. Is this to deal with a public hearing?
Chair Baker, no, I was going to offer information. It can wait.
All right. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? And again, is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this application? If not, I will officially close the public hearing for this application and open it up to my colleagues for a motion or discussion. Before we go there, I will ask Mr. Williams, did you want to highlight anything?
Oh, Chair Baker, thank you. No, please carry on with your deliberations. I merely wanted to offer that there is a lot of history here, and for better or for worse, I'm one of the only people who knows most of it. So should the committee have any questions, I'm happy to answer them about the background here.
Thanks, Mr. Williams. I will entertain a motion or discussion from my colleagues at this time. Commissioner Hood.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. I just wanted to discuss whether or not there was any interest in laying this over. My personal opinion is that the temporary status of the parking lot was written for an express purpose back in 2005, and it's been continued thereafter. And that was that we recognize that this is a key corner, a corner that we want to quote, to use urban design language, we want to hold the corner. It's what creates great walkability. It's what creates great places. It's what create great cities. I understand that we don't want them to be forced to rip it up today or tomorrow, whatever that may be. But I think that this really warrants further discussion on whether or not we should continue the temporary status of the conditional use of this parking lot. That's something that I would support. But maintaining a parking lot here into perpetuity, I think, goes against the original intent of the conditional use. And I think that, in my mind, that's the right move that we made today.
Thanks, Mr. Hood. Yeah, any other comments or motion, Commissioner Grill?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Grill. I am also leaning that direction. I understand that the business needs it now and St. Thomas needs it now. But, even if we extended it for 10 years or 15 years, I think that it gives us more options. And I think that something like that also would probably get us around the having to come back to the committee, every time, every few years. But I'm wondering if there is some option like that people would be at least willing to entertain. And I don't think everyone's available today at 6 o'clock to have the long discussion about what that looks like. So I'm tempted to agree with Mr. Hood. I don't know where everybody else stands though.
Thanks, Commissioner Grill. I'd just like to say before I turn over to Commissioner Ringo Morales, I understand where Commissioner Hood and Commissioner Grill is coming from. I just want to highlight that and no commissioner actually has said this. I think I just want to put out in the space that the applicant, so St. Thomas, is responding to what they've been asked to respond to, which is instead of kind of this back and forth, and I agree that things have changed. I don't think that their request for permanency, I don't think they're doing anything wrong. So I just want to highlight that. It's coming across to me that there was a request for them to do something different, so there wouldn't necessarily be back and forth. So that's number one. Number two is I understand also where Commissioner's coming from around feelings in saying that this will be a parking lot into a never-ending parking lot is a concern, and I do see that. And I want to make sure that we have opportunity and time to discuss it. But I would not be in favor for changing the current use and not extending this for my thought would be it would need to be longer than 5 years. I think that there's a lot that has changed. I think that this current parking lot is doing a lot for at least one business owner there, and the myriad amounts of housing is just different. So I would not be in favor for another 3 or 5 years or something like that. I either think that my suggestion would be to approve what is being before us or extend the timeline so this does not happen within the next 5 years. I see Commissioner Rango Morales, and then I will definitely entertain a motion. Commissioner Rango Morales?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, but I think I come to a different conclusion than you, Chair Baker. So I understand that the applicant is sort of asking for this to be in perpetuity, given the request by the city. It's not necessarily that that's what they would have requested on their own, or we don't really even know what they came to the city with in terms of a time span of what they were hoping for. But when they said, you know, come with us with a more permanent solution, one way of interpreting it is we're going to keep this as a parking lot forever. The way that I understood that was, what are we going to do with this actual corner, like to Commissioner Hood's point. And so it just the particular location is what's concerning, in that if we're trying to build up these corners to drive a more walkable St. Paul and kind of along that theory, it doesn't make sense to keep it as a parking lot, even for as long as another 5 or 10 years. So I'm more inclined to think that if there is an extension, whatever the time of that extension is, if there could be a caveat in there that would be the last extension, and going forward, that area needs to either be turned back into a green space or needs to be developed into a more useful site.
I have thanks for that, Commissioner Reagan Morales. My concern on that is not even a concern. I guess my question is, how does that work? Because I'm thinking about teeth of enforcement of if we're saying that you can't build that into a parking lot anymore, and they own it. I don't know how that necessarily works to get at what you want, that it doesn't automatically have to become a green space.
Right. Sorry. Let me rephrase. It would be more in terms of the CUP that was granted in 2004, that was granted this 10-year period of being able to use it as a parking lot, and then if with enough extensions, you sort of lose. With enough extensions, you sort of lose the intention of what the original 2004 request was. And so it would be more about saying, I don't know if we are even allowed to do that. So I mean, my thought was along the lines of saying no more extensions on the CUP from 2004. Either do what whatever it is you're going to do with that property, or do whatever the CUP from 2004 requires you to do.
Thanks, Commissioner Reyna Morales. Mr. Williams.
Yes, Chair Baker, thank you. I just wanted to make sure, because this is such an odd situation. So technically the requirement regarding removing the parking lot is a condition of site plan approval for McNeely Hall, not of the CUP. The judgment of the Planning Commission at the time of that site plan approval was that a parking lot at the location that it's at was not consistent with the CUP, which is to me a different question than whether or not. Well, I guess I will just leave it at that.
So I would, hearing my fellow commissioners, and I think maybe this question goes over to Mr. Warner and Mr. Williams. What are the ramifications of laying this over? Because I feel like there's some understanding that potentially could still be done. And my concern is that a vote right now may not encompass the overall information that potentially is needed to vote effectively, if that makes sense. Please let me know if there needs to be clarification. So I'm trying to understand options right now.
Chair, if I may, Peter Warner, I think as the commissioners were chatting, I was thinking, please, Commissioner Hood, make a motion to lay over. I think it would be useful for you as to understand a little bit more about the history of that particular corner, and I think it was important for Josh to point out that the evolution of that corner had to go with the McNeely Hall site plan, and also and how that was tied into the revised conditional use permit for the expansion of St. Thomas, when there was a huge concern in the neighborhood about making sure that St. Thomas would build residential halls as opposed to academic buildings and sports facilities. And so I think it would be worthwhile if the matter were laid over so that Mr. Williams might flesh that out a little bit more for you. I also think, given the testimony today that you've heard from both St. Thomas and the proprietor of the restaurant across the street, that that parking lot has taken on a difference in the neighborhood than it was in 2005. And I think in that context, that should be explored a little bit more thoroughly. And so the idea of an indefinite suspension, a removal, a 10-year, a 15-year extension, I think all those things are worthwhile for you to think about so that you can make a more informed decision when you present your recommendation to the full Planning Commission.
Thanks, Mr. Warner. I appreciate that. So I will entertain a motion. My request, if there could be one, is that if there is someone that is potentially going to make a motion to lay this over, that a part of that motion is for staff to have so Mr. Williams as staff, but staff to provide information to the zoning committee around the history, and specifically the connection between McNeely Hall and that CUP and the parking lot, and also the overall context of the neighborhood. I want to make sure that before we vote yes or no on this, that we understand what was actually going on at that time, the concern, and I think it'll be a little bit of a better opportunity to cast our votes, if that makes sense. So I will entertain a motion if anybody is willing. Commissioner Rangel Morales.
I would make a motion to lay this over for 2 weeks to allow Mr. Williams more time to get us additional information regarding the history of this site, along with the site plan approval at McNeely Hall. I would also add that I think it would be relevant to know how St. Thomas has developed generally in terms of other projects that have been built, both residence halls, athletic halls, general campus areas, just because I think it ties with the issue of why the site has stayed as a parking lot as opposed to being developed into something else.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that, Commissioner Rangel Morales. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? I see Commissioner Hood.
I will second the motion.
All right, we have a second. Any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none, I will move for a vote.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
Yes.
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Rangel Morales,
Yes.
and Chair Baker.
Yes.
7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you so much. That motion passes. This item will be laid over for 2 weeks. And Mr. Williams, I feel like you have, hopefully you have what you need in coming back to the committee.
Chair Baker, I will take that as a question.
Yes.
I believe so. I will do my best to provide more context. It's a lot has happened, so
Okay.
it may be long.
Thanks for that. And that was our last item. Thank you all. And I just want to say to my fellow committee members, thanks for your continued and consistent engagement on each and every application. It feels good to know that you've done your homework, you've read through the application and the packet, and you're ready to go back and forth and dig into these items. So I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it, and please continue that type of engagement. It's helpful. All right. Have a great evening, everyone.
Yep. Thank you, Chair, committee members. Take care.
Thanks, Mr. Warner.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks,
Thank
Mr.
you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.